The rain hammered the tall windows of St. Mercy Hospital, turning the outside world into a smear of silver and black. Sarah paused beneath the buzzing fluorescent light of the entrance, tightening the laces of her shoes with fingers that didn't feel entirely steady. It was ridiculous to be nervous. She had trained for years, survived exams, handled emergencies. A quiet night shift should have been easy. Yet the moment the automatic doors slid shut behind her, the building seemed to inhale. Daytime noise had vanished. No rolling carts. No chatter from families. Even the televisions in the waiting room were dark. The air smelled sharply of disinfectant with something older underneath, like damp paper forgotten in a basement. Her footsteps echoed too loudly as she crossed the lobby toward the reception desk. "Hello," she called, half expecting someone to answer. Only a distant electronic beep replied, slow and tired, repeating from somewhere deep in the corridors. The security guard was shrugging into his coat near the exit. He offered her a look that lingered a little too long, as if he wanted to say something but wasn't sure how. Finally, he cleared his throat. "First night alone?" he asked. Sarah nodded, trying to smile. "Yeah, I'll manage." He hesitated, fingers tightening on the strap of his bag. "If a patient calls from the 4th floor," he said carefully, "don't go." Sarah let out a small laugh. Why would they call if they didn't need help? The guard didn't smile back. "There are no patients on 4. Before she could ask anything else, he pushed through the doors and disappeared into the rain. Sarah stood there for a long moment, listening to the storm and the hum of the lights. Old buildings had rumors. Every hospital had them. Closed wards, mistaken calls, equipment that turned on by itself. Stress made people imagine patterns. "It's just a building," she whispered, placing her bag behind the desk. Minutes passed. Paperwork helped. Routine helped more. Her breathing slowed. The silence became manageable. Then, at exactly 12:17 a.m., the desk phone rang. Sarah glanced down. Caller ID, room 401. Her mouth went dry, and without meaning to, she looked toward the elevator at the end of the hall. The elevator doors tried to close twice before they finally obeyed, shuttering together with a tired metallic clap. Sarah jabbed the button for the 4th floor and instantly wished she hadn't. The numbers above the door glowed in a slow climb, each one lighting with a dull pulse that matched the hammering in her chest. "It's crossed wiring," she told herself. "An old system. Someone bumped the wrong extension." The car smelled faintly of rust and antiseptic. Her reflection in the brushed steel walls looked washed out, almost gray, like she was already part of the hospital instead of just working in it. She practiced a professional expression, the calm face nurses wore when things were under control. Ding! The doors slid open. Darkness waited. Not the soft, practical dimness of night mode, but a thick, swallowed kind of dark, interrupted only by strips of red emergency lighting running low along the floor. Dust coated the reception counter ahead. A coffee mug sat beside a computer that looked decades old. Everything felt paused, abandoned in the middle of a sentence. Sarah stepped out before she could change her mind. "Hello," she called, her voice traveling too far, bouncing back thinner. No reply. Then came the sound, fabric dragging across linoleum. Slow. Patient. Her eyes found the numbers on the doors. 398, 399, 400. Room 401 stood at the end of the corridor, open just an inch. A pale hospital glow leaked from inside, bright compared to the hall. Machines hummed with the steady dedication of things that believed someone still needed them. "I'm a nurse," she said automatically, pushing the door wider. "I got your call." The bed was occupied. A figure lay beneath the blanket, head-shaped rise on the pillow, arms tucked at the sides. The heart monitor traced a weak, obedient rhythm. Oxygen hissed. Relief fluttered in her chest. See? A mistake. Someone forgot to transfer. Sir, she asked, stepping closer. The shape beneath the sheet softened. Collapsed. As if whatever filled it had gently sunk through the mattress. Sarah froze. What? The monitor shrieked, the line going flat in a violent, endless tone. Behind her, the door slammed. The sound cracked like a gunshot. And from the air beside her ear, warm and certain, a voice whispered, You came. Sarah stumbled backward, her heel catching the edge of the bed. The flatline wailed and wailed, loud enough to drill through her skull, yet somehow the rest of the hospital remained impossibly silent. No rushing footsteps. No code announcement. No help. I don't understand, she whispered. Where are you? The machines kept running even though there was no patient. The oxygen mask lay collapsed on itself, rising and falling as if lungs still borrowed it. The curtain near the window stirred though the glass was sealed shut. Panic finally took control. Sarah bolted for the door, yanking it open with more strength than she thought she had. She expected the hallway she remembered, the dusty desk, the red lights, the long straight path back to the elevator. Instead, the corridor stretched impossibly far, bending at angles that hurt her eyes. The ceiling seemed taller, the shadows thicker. Room numbers repeated, skipped, twisted upside down. Her breath came in sharp, tearing pulls. This isn't real, she said. I'm overtired. I'm dreaming. Something shuffled behind her. Not one pair of feet. Many. Sarah turned. Patients filled the hallway, emerging from rooms she was certain had been empty. Their gowns hung loose, open at the back, their skin pale with the faint blue tint of old moonlight. Wristbands circled their arms, yellowed with age. Some pushed for poles that rolled without sound. All of them watched her. No anger. No mercy. Just recognition. She backed into the nurse's station and felt papers brush against her hands. Files littered the desk, charts stacked in messy piles. A photograph rested on top, curled at the edges like it had been handled too often. Sarah picked it up. A nurse smiled at the camera, young, hopeful, wearing the same badge she had clipped on earlier that night. The same eyes. The same mouth. Her name printed neatly underneath. Admitted. 20 years ago. Status. Deceased. That's not me, she said, though the certainty in her voice had begun to rot. I would remember. But something was pushing through, slow and unstoppable. Headlights in the rain. A steering wheel. The violent bloom of white. The intercom crackled overhead, clearing its throat like it had been waiting. Return to your room, Sarah, a calm voice said. The patients leaned closer. You're one of us, they breathed. Sarah pressed her palms against her ears, but the whispering moved through her anyway, slipping past skin and bone, settling deep where denial had been living. The hallway no longer felt endless. It felt arranged, purposeful, like it had always been built to guide her back to a place she had refused to see. I'm not dead, she begged, though the words were losing shape. I came here for my first shift. I walked through the doors. I talked to the guard. Memories answered, patient and merciless. Rain on a windshield. Tires skidding. A horn that never stopped. The sudden, impossible light. She had never walked through the hospital doors. Not alive. The version of her that remembered tying her shoes, clocking in, organizing papers, that was the dream. A kindness, maybe. A delay. The intercom hummed again, softer now, almost sympathetic. Return to your room, Sarah. The patients began to drift away, shuffling backward into their doorways. None of them broke eye contact. They wore expressions she finally understood. They weren't hunting her. They were welcoming her home. At the far end of the corridor, the figure from room 401 waited. Tall, blurred at the edges, like a shadow cast by something that didn't belong to the world of light. It did not walk, yet it came closer. "You heard the call," it said, its voice layered with many others. "You always hear it. The ones who cannot accept, who keep working, who keep moving, they answer." Sarah's fear was unraveling, thread by thread, replaced by exhaustion older than her body. She thought of how tired she had been when the phone rang, how natural it felt to help, to respond,
to stay.
"What happens if I don't go?" she asked. The figure tilted its head with gentle curiosity, as if the idea had never truly existed. "You will," it replied. Room numbers settled into order. The lights warmed from red to gold. The station looked less abandoned, more eternal, preserved in a quiet that would never break. A door stood open beside her. Inside waited a bed shaped perfectly for her. Sarah felt the last of her resistance loosen its grip. Truth did not need to chase. It only waited until running became impossible. With slow steps, she walked inside. Morning unfolded gently over St. Mercy Hospital, sunlight washing the building in harmless shades of gold. The storm had passed, leaving the sidewalks wet and shining. Inside, the familiar rhythm of the day returned as if the night had never existed. Phones rang. Elevators chimed. Nurses traded tired smiles while the smell of fresh coffee drifted from the staff lounge. At the reception desk stood Daniel, the newest hire, smoothing the front of his uniform for the third time in 5 minutes. Orientation papers trembled slightly in his hands. First nights were always the worst, everyone had told him, but daylight made the place seem ordinary. Manageable. "Night shift is quiet," a passing orderly said. "You'll be fine." Daniel nodded, grateful for the reassurance. Behind him, Sarah watched. She stood near the wall beside the elevator, hands folded, posture perfect. She looked rested now, complete. If anyone had glanced her way, they might have mistaken her for another member of staff waiting for instructions. But no one looked. They moved through her, around her, past her, never at her. At first the invisibility had hurt. Now it felt like part of the uniform. She had tried to count how many mornings she'd seen, but time in the hospital did not move forward. It circled, repeated, reset with the sun. New faces arrived carrying nerves and polite smiles, and every night one of them learned the truth. Not all, just the ones who answered. Daniel worked through the evening, growing more comfortable as hours slipped by. He laughed at a joke from a paramedic. He organized charts. Midnight crept closer, patient as a hunter. Sarah drifted toward the desk. She wanted to speak, to shake him, to break whatever rule kept her voice thin as dust. She remembered the terror of not knowing. If someone had warned her, really warned her. The digital clock turned. 12:17 a.m. The phone rang. Both of them looked down. Caller ID. Room 401. Daniel hesitated, a small crease forming between his brows. Sarah leaned close, pouring every ounce of herself into the air between them. "Don't go," she whispered. For a moment, she thought he heard. His fingers hovered, uncertain. Then training, kindness, duty, those heavy human habits, took over. He lifted the receiver. A frail voice slipped into the quiet. "Please help me." Sarah closed her eyes. The elevator was already coming.